We saw examples for ngStyle and ngIf. Now, something related to ngStyle is ngClass. Now we learned that ngStyle allows us to dynamically assign a style. Now I will also add ngClass here. And where ngStyle allowed us to change the CSS style itself, ngClass allows us to dynamically add or remove CSS classes. So let's create such a class. And for this, I will first of all add my styles here. And I will use backticks to write this over multiple lines. And I will give this a class name of online, in which case I want to color the text white. So that's all I want to do, because I think it's kind of hard to read the black text on the green background. So back here, ngClass also, this is the directive, also only works as intended when using property binding. So let's wrap it in squared brackets 2. And here we also need to pass a JavaScript object. And that's just the case for this property of this directive here, of course. Each property you bind to may take a different value, like disabled, which took true or false. So here it's a JavaScript object. And for ngClass, this object works like this. We also have key value pairs. The keys are the CSS class names, and the values are the conditions determining whether this class should be attached or not. So here we have the online class. You could also wrap this in single quotation marks if you had a class name with a dash inside of it or something like this. And here, well, I want to attach this only if the server is online. So only if server status equals online. Online here is a string between single quotation marks. Now, of course, you could also outsource this in a method you call this server status equals online check, but here I will write it inline. So if this is online, we should attach the CSS class online to this paragraph, otherwise it should not get attached. Let's view this in the running application. Both are offline, so none of the two should have the online CSS class added to it, and indeed, I can't find the class on any of the two. Now let's reload and hope that some of them is offline, or online, excuse me. Both are, so let's check it. Now we see the online class has been added, actually, to both of them, because this is how ngClass works. It only adds a CSS class if a certain condition is true. And that's an example for another built-in directive, another built-in attribute directive. With all these directives learned, let's now have a look at the last built-in directive for now. An important one though. It's sad that we can click the Add Server button, but we don't actually add servers to our list here, right? This list doesn't grow, this list is totally static. We can change this with the ng-for directive. So let's have a look at how it works. In our servers component here, we right now manually add our app server component twice. It would be nicer to have an array of servers which adds it dynamically. So in the servers component here, I'll add a new property, servers, and this is an array, and here I could have my test server and my test server 2 maybe. And when we create a new server here, I actually want to access this array of servers and push a new server on it. And this should of course use the server name I set up. Now with this, I have an array of servers. It would now be great if we could replicate the app server component as often as needed to have a server for each element in the array. So 2 initially, and then a new one for each server we add. We can do this. I'll get rid of the second app server here. And on the first one, I will place another directive with a star, because this is now also a structural directive, changing the DOM itself. It's the ng-for directive. The ng-for base syntax looks like this. We define a temporary variable for inside the loop with let. Give it any name you like server, for example. And then of servers. Servers here is the property we defined in the TypeScript file, and this will now loop through all elements in this array and assign the individual element to this dynamic server variable. So that's just like you might know this loop from a normal, JavaScript code, the for/of loop. This server variable can now be used in the template. But here we don't really need it, to be honest. We will soon learn in the next course section how we can pass data to our own components to output it there. So for now, we won't need that. But one thing we should see is that if I save this and we go back to our application, we still see 2 because we start with 2. But if I add more servers, you see our list grows. And we can click this as often as we want. Of course, the content of the individual server is still static because we can't pass the data, like the server name, to that component. But that is something we will learn in the next course section when we dive deeper into components, and we will learn how we can create our own properties on components. We can then set from outside a feature which would be great to have here. So let's dive into this in the next course section. Before doing so though, let's practice the things we learned in the last lectures, and then let's also set up our course project before we then dive deeper into components and data binding again. So, see you there. Were you successful? Let's solve it together. I'll start right below this ordered list and add a button with some CSS classes, button primary, where I will say display details. Or maybe you should even say toggle displays now that I think about it, but I'll leave it at this. Then I'll add my paragraph where I say any text you like. Here I will stick to secret password equals tuna, and I only want to display this, well, if it is not displayed. And if it is displayed, I want to not display it. So really toggle it. That's super easy to implement. I'll add a property to my app component, which I'll name show secret, any name you like, of course. And I will set this to false initially. And now in my app component, I'll add a click listener to my button with event binding. And here I will simply set show secret equal to what show secret currently is not. So that is a quick and easy way of toggling it. So if it is false, it will be set to true. If it was true, it will be set to false. Now with that, I can add ngIf here and check if show secret is true and only show it in this case. Now with this and ngServe still running, if we go back and I click this, now you see the toggling works as expected, so the first 3 tasks are already solved. Now let's move on to the fourth one, logging it to the console. For this, I'll actually duplicate this button and comment out the first solution with the easy toggling, because for logging, I will call a method now on toggle display maybe, or on toggle display, on toggle details, excuse me, any name you like though. I'll add this as a method in the app component. And first of all, I will still use my toggling code here. So I will set this show secret to what show secret is not. But then I want to log it. So I'll name this log and it should be an empty array at the beginning. And then here I will simply say this log push. And I want to push a new number. And this number should actually take into account the current length of this. So if this is at the beginning has 0 items, this will be 0. So I'll add +1. So if you have one element in the array, the length will be 1. So the next element should have a value of 2. So this adds these items to the log. Now I will output it below the paragraph, and I will choose a div element here. I will use ngFor on it, and we learned that we use ngFor by saying let. And now we could say log item, any name you like, of log, so of the property you want to loop through, or generally the data piece you want to loop through. That could also be a method call returning an array. It has to be an array though. So here we loop through the log, and between the div opening and closing tags, I can now use string interpolation to output by log item. Now we didn't do this in the last lectures, but I told you that log item is a variable we can now use in the template. And that's exactly what we're doing here. I'm outputting log item. So with this, if we have a look at our application and I click this button, you see that I add this list. It's jumping around because I'm adding and removing this secret password, but you see the list is growing as expected, the log is working. Now about that coloring, the fifth step here. Well, it's easy to do when using a number like this. When doing so, I'll go to my div and I will start with the style, the blue background. So we'll use ng-style, and we learned we need property binding for this to work correctly because we need to pass a JavaScript object configuring our styles when we want to attach which styles. So the style I want to attach is the background color. I'll again use camel case notation, though you could use single quotation marks to have background dash color as a name. And now here, it's easy to check if log item is a number, because I want to check if log item is greater or equal than 5. In which case background color should be blue, this is a string. Otherwise it will be transparent or white to basically have a non-blue background here. Log item of course is a number, so this check should be easy. And yes, you could outsource this part, of course, into a method you call here, generally having most of the logic in the TypeScript code, in the body of your component is a good practice, but here I think it's also okay to put it into the template and show that this is possible too. With this check now in place, let's see if it works as expected. If I click this button, the next item should have a blue background. And it does. So that's working, but pretty hard to read, right? So let's finish the second part here and give it a white color. For this, in my CSS file, I will define a white text class name, any name you like, of course, that's totally up to you. And I will set the color to white. Now this white text CSS class should only be attached if we are at element 5 or higher. So next to ng-style, I will also add ng-class and I will use property binding, so squared brackets, here too, because I need to pass a JavaScript object to the ng-class property on the ng-class directive to have it work correctly, because this directive needs to know which classes should be attached when. Well, between single quotation marks, since we have a dash inside the name, I'll add the white text class, the class we just created here, only if the condition specified here as a value returns true. And the condition simply is log item greater or equal than 5, just like on the ng-style directive. So if this returns true, we should have the white text class attached, which should turn the text white. Let's see if it works. I'll click display details, so here the text clearly is not white, that is working. And now, looks good, blue background, white text. Awesome. Now I will show a nice bonus to the solution in the next lecture actually, where I will use timestamps because it uses an extra addition of ng4 we haven't seen before.